Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and boys and girls, and whoever, what other kind of genders are listening along on this impromptu window philosopher post. As you well know, as the listeners will well know, that my favorite time to think and philosophize, by the way, we're driving by the Texas Motor Speedway here in Fort Worth. Big racetrack over here. Let's show this real quick, and then I'm going to get into the meat and potatoes of my philosophy, my window time philosophy. Texas Motor Speedway. I don't know how good of a look y'all can get at it. Pretty big place. Pretty big place. Anyway, so as you well know, I'm on 35 West coming through Fort Worth, if you know where the Texas Motor Speedway is. And today I want to discuss the concept of what you know. And one of my adages that I've used for a long time is, it's not what you know, but who you believe. In other words, knowledge that we have is a learned thing. Now, we can also use, there's a Buc-ees if you've all never seen a Buc-ees. These are like Walmart gas stations. They're as big as a damn Walmart. Anyway, back to my discussion. But also, if you're of the philosophical mindset, then you would probably say, well, that's not true. It's not what you know, because knowledge is experience. But those are two different kinds of knowledges I'm talking about. Like the knowledge of climbing a mountain and learning from your mistakes, or learning, or just kind of learning as you on the go. It's kind of different than what I'm talking about. I'm kind of talking about the abstract, like socially engineered version of knowledge. Like when I say it's not what you know, it's who you believe, I'm not meaning in the type of knowledge that you would gain by experience. I mean the type of knowledge that you have kind of been indoctrinated with. So what I want to do today is kind of give you a little short lesson into how to really test your database, test your knowledge. Because it's a really, ever since this COVID thing has popped off, it really has put into question really what you really know. And so a big thing is, it's trust. I mean, so you have a bunch of people who are somehow or another in positions to determine narratives, and they control the narrative of a society. And it's almost like it's always binary. It's always polarized. And what I mean by that is let me just use COVID for example. So the whole COVID pandemic, you had, allegedly the smartest people on the planet working on a solution. And we're supposed to believe that all of these people just came to the exact same conclusion, like it was just either, like you had just only one option. It's this total binary thought, right? So, for those who didn't, think that they got it right with the vaccines, or how, whatever measures, masks or social distancing or whatever. For those who don't think that those were the right solutions, the counter narrative is just the opposite of that, right? So it's always presented, all things in linear thought are presented in A and B dynamics. Like we don't have like multiple options. So it's like, oh, well, if you don't want to take the vaccine, you must be anti-vax. Or if you don't want to wear a mask, you must not care about your, it's just you just take the antithesis of a position, and that becomes your position. And I think that's flawed in the human thought process. It's a flaw in the human thought process, because there should be 1,000 different solutions. I would think that if you had 40 different geniuses, think tank genius groups or whatever, working on a solution to the COVID pandemic, that you would come up with probably 40 different solutions. But yet we only have one, and it was a solution that's not able to be questioned. So that therefore creates a huge level of mistrust. So anyway, I don't want to get too far down the COVID rabbit hole, because this isn't really about COVID. I was just using that as an example of how, you know, our narrative is always binary. Like why can't it be trinary or quaternary or something like that? Octonary. Why can't there be multiple solutions? And it's because the human mind is extremely polarized, and the social engineers want to keep it that way. It's not a coincidence that we have a two-party system. Okay, it's not a coincidence that everything is virtually painted into a black and white landscape. You don't want a lot of options. Psychologically speaking, that's known as analysis paralysis. Like, you walk down the cereal aisle and there's 50 different cereals, and you're just kind of almost paralyzed with indecision. But anyway, the test that I want to kind of give you is I want you to take maybe just certain positions that you hold, and then just kind of analyze them. For instance, again, we could use the COVID thing. Like, let's just take how you feel about the COVID. Now, obviously, if you've had COVID and whatever, that's where knowledge is experienced. Like, it's not probably even going to matter what the narrative is, because you've experienced it, so you have your own knowledge. But we can take anything. We could take thoughts on space exploration, on landing on the moon, on just World War II, on historical events of all degrees, all of these things, and then just analyze your position in those realms. So, and then once you analyze your position in that, whatever your knowledge, quote unquote, is, then just kind of figure out how you got there. Excuse me. And then analyze or assume hypothetically assume the altering position. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get you to look at your views objectively, because there is an objective reality. Like, people usually aren't able to get outside of the box and think outside of subjective reality, and they never question their positions on things. And this is a huge flaw in the human intellect, in the human consciousness, is to never. The ego seems to get into a way of all these things. You don't want your ego to prevent you from knowing the truth, right? I mean, because at the end of the day, your ego shouldn't care. At the end of the day, if you are an egomaniac, I mean, if you really want to be an egomaniac, you should always be focused on being right, knowing the truth. I mean, what does that say about your ego if you're willing to go down fighting with something that's not the truth? So again, just take a position that you hold and then make arguments for that opposite position, and just see which one is more rational, and see what decisions that you can come to, or what conclusions you can come to. Because I'll be almost guaranteed that any position that you hold that's not based on experience can be picked apart really easily if you were being honest with yourself. If you were acting in good faith, you could pick apart your position probably pretty easily. So for instance, like, if you think that Fauci's done everything right, well, why don't you analyze all of Fauci's decisions on COVID and see if you can point out a lot of things where he was wrong, and try to assume. Like, Fauci could be right on some things. Maybe he's wrong on some things. The idea that people are holding this idea that Fauci's never been wrong about COVID or something like that. And again, I'm not trying to hyper-focus on COVID here. It's just something that's really within the public consciousness right now, so it's something easy to use as an analogy. If you have this mindset that Fauci Inc. meaning like the elites in the system who have made all of these decisions about COVID, have never been wrong, then you're wrong. And that's not a knock on Fauci. Fauci's a human. I think one of the big problems with the trust-based system that we have from COVID and Fauci Inc. is that they've never came out and acknowledged where they've been wrong. And they've been wrong a lot. I don't try to get in, I don't try to assume intent and try to get into anybody else's head and judge where they're, why they're, try to judge their motivations. I don't have any idea. But the idea that you can come out and say you've never been wrong or whatever, and whenever it's obvious that you've been wrong about a lot of things, I think that really puts you in a bad spot as far as trust, especially whenever, for instance, we're 2 years into this pandemic and you've made all these people take injections that a lot of them didn't want to take, and you're having the biggest outbreak of COVID that's even happened. So, any rational person would require kind of a stepping back and reanalyzing their decisions, because they've been wrong on a lot of things. None of the things they've really done have worked. So anyway, so if you're a Fauci, let's just say the opposite. Like if you're someone who gets on Facebook and says Fauci should be in prison or something like that, well, let's, maybe kind of look at the things that maybe where he was right, and just, I think everything is so polarized, everything is so bipolar, if you will, that we really need to step back and just not assume that everything and everybody is all one or all the other. Like, like for instance, like if someone's a racist or whatever, like maybe they don't particularly care to be around black people or something. Like, how does that one thing make them a bad person? Perhaps they're the most charitable person you've ever seen. Maybe they're a great father. Maybe they're awesome at playing basketball or something like that. Again, so I just think that this consumptive one world view is really detrimental to the overall state of an individual's intellect. So anyway, that's about it for now. I'm just driving down the road and kind of thinking out loud. Perhaps if y'all got some insight or some questions, shoot me some comments and I'll address them. Take care.